Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, guys. Today we're going to be discussing a very important topic. Okay, can energy be created or destroyed? Okay, so you know this law, the law of conservation of energy, or something like this, that energy can never be created nor destroyed, or something like this. And I think we have to disagree with that. We have to say yes, energy can be created and it can be destroyed. Why? Because we believe in God. We are theists. Okay, and I'll show you even as an atheist. Does this actually make sense? But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, as a theist, as someone that believes in God, as someone that believes in creation, can you hold on to this kind of doctrine that something can never be created nor destroyed? And you know the funny thing, the first person I heard this from was actually just a normal guy. He doesn't go deep into these topics. He just said, I don't think we agree with this. And he just no. Then I started thinking about it, and from other topics that I've been thinking about, and the idea of our total reliance on God, tawakkul, meaning, for instance, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and things like that. I have come to this conclusion that you have to disagree with that. Okay, we have to give all power absolutely back to God, because we believe, for instance, that we are created. So the first thing we need to understand, that what does it mean for God to be the creator? What does that mean? For God to be the creator, it means that God can literally bring things from non-existence to existence. Do you understand what that means? God can bring something that didn't exist before into existence. Do you understand? That is what God can do. And therefore, if this is true, then God can annihilate anything too. Just like God can bring something into existence, God can remove something from existence also. God can create, sustain, and annihilate. This is within God's power and His will. God can do this. Okay? Now, if you believe this, now let me share with you two theories of creation that has been around. And I think if you hold on to any of the positions, you will actually see which one actually gives more power back to God. So the first one is creation ex-Nihilo. Okay? Creation from nothing. Is the idea I just proposed to you, that something was non-existent, absolutely non-existent, and then it begins to exist. So God is the reason for anything that begins to exist. Of course, God didn't begin to exist. So every other thing that begins to exist, God is the one that causes them to exist. That is creation ex nihilo. Okay. Now, on the other hand, there's another doctrine, creation ex materia, that God created us from an already existing matter. So there's an eternal matter that God used to create everything that exists. That is the second doctrine. And a lot of people have held this view, or tend to allude to this view, because of some verses in the Quran and even the Bible that, for example, that things like al-ma. And if you go deep into those verses, you will see God didn't talk specifically. I created this one, I created that one. But we have verses in the Quran that says, for instance, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ, that Allah created everything. Okay, so some people are skeptical that should we say God created everything, absolutely, even the matter? So they believe is like clay. You mold the clay into a particular object that you want, but the clay was already there. That's what they are saying. This idea, the clay was already there, and then you mold it into whatever you want. So this is the kind of idea that they have. It's called creation ex materia. I don't believe in this one. I believe in total, from non-existent to existent. Something that didn't exist before, and then it begins to exist without anything already existing as a material for it. Okay, we believe even that material, God created it. The other view saying no, the material was already there, God used that to create. We have to disagree with this. And one of the reasons is that material, it will be eternal, it will be alongside God, eternal, uncreated. That material is uncreated, even though you might say the form that it takes is created, or is formed. Should you even use creation anymore? But the point is that material, notice one thing that material will have. It will have some certain nature, some certain properties that God will have to abide by in order for you to, like clay, you can use it to do a particular set of things. You cannot use it to do something that a clay cannot do, for instance. So that material, whatever it is formless. It's going to have some kind of, restrictions of how it can be molded or formed. So that's one of the problems with that. So God would have to abide by that law. Whereas on the other hand, we are saying God can create from absolutely non-existence anything whatsoever. anything that can exist, God can bring into existence without obeying any law. So there will be like some kind of law of the material that God has to abide by. We are saying without any law, God can bring something into existence. Absolutely. Okay. So now this is the first part I want you guys to understand. The creation that we believe in is that God creates something that didn't exist before, not something that already existed and it just molded it. We don't believe that. Now I'll use it to show. We go to the next level now. This is the second part. Okay. The second part is that every action has to have a sufficient reason for it to occur. I'm taking it beyond this energy created stuff. I want to use it to actually establish some kind of teachings for you. Okay, this is tying with all I've been talking about occasionalism and all those Asharite theory of cusp and occasionalism and everything. But the idea is that, look at this now. There are some things is beyond your control, and this ties in back with it. I'm sure I will show you in the end. There are some things that are beyond your control. For instance, your eyes are blinking, your heart is pumping. You're not in charge of these things. So this is level 1. Level 1 are things that is beyond your control. You're not the one controlling it. Your heart beating, your eyes blinking. Some of these things you're not controlling them. The way your blood is running in your body, you're not controlling that. Okay, but there's a second level. The second level is I move my hand. So while I'm moving my hand, okay, do I believe that? I believe somehow that I have control over this one. Maybe I don't have control over my heart, but I have control over my hand. I can move it from one position to another position. Now we're going to examine this. What does this mean actually? You remember what I said? I said for every action that is going to occur, there has to be a sufficient reason for it to occur. If those conditions are not met, it can never move. Okay? So if there's something lacking in there, it will not be able to move. That is the idea of the sufficient reason. So you move your hand. So let's say my hand is in this place and it goes to this place. What I'm saying is that for my hand to be able to move from here to here, there has to be some certain conditions that have been met for that to be able to be possible. Even if one of them is lacking, the motion will be impossible. It will not happen. It will just stay there. Okay? Now, what is this sufficient reason? Let's call it like a property, X. Let's put them in a set. All the conditions that is necessary for my hand to move from here to here, let's put them in a set. Let's call it X, okay? We call it X. Now, all these conditions, what are they? All the observable physical signs. Maybe something going on in my brain or the condition of the atmosphere, whatever. All the observable physical signs that facilitate my hand moving from here to here, we put them in a set. Remember what I said? They are physical, because that's what we can observe. Okay? Now, we as theists, okay, we believe this is not sufficient. It's not sufficient for you, or even if all those physical conditions are there, it's not sufficient for your hand to move from here to here. It doesn't logically follow. It doesn't follow logically, okay, that all those conditions are there. Physical, I said physical, then your hand will move from here to here. No, we believe there's an extra condition. So it's not sufficient. That X, as long as they are all physical signs, is not sufficient for your hand to move, for change to occur. Okay? So you can have all those same properties and your hand will not still move. Your hand will not move. That's what we are saying. All the exact same thing. Let's say scientists have gotten to the highest top-notch level and they are able to check all the signs necessary for your hand to move from here to here. They put all the signs on my brain to check. We are saying it will still not, the same condition, one it moves, the other one doesn't move, and it's the same exact same condition. Because how are we saying this? First of all, we know it doesn't logically follow for that to happen. Okay, it's just correlation, but we are making a claim that it is God's will. It is by God's will, and it's not something physical that you can examine. It is by God's will that this thing can happen. Okay, you are making it a necessary condition, and I will show you. You might be like, how do you prove this? Okay, so that's the claim we are making. We are making a claim that X will not be sufficient, okay, for atheists. It's not sufficient because we literally believe in creation, which means that God can literally create or annihilate without any physical observable reason. God is the only one that can create and cause things to happen without any physical reason. There's no physical reason. And you'll be like, what do you mean by that? I'll go deep into it. But this is what this is our premise. God is the only one that can create without any physical reason. And things will come into existence. Okay? That's what we are hinging it on. Okay? So now let's go through what is the proof for this. Okay? Now, we know, as long as you believe this, this argument actually is more for the theist than an atheist, because maybe he's not convinced by this, maybe he doesn't want to believe in this, but I'm showing you rationally you can prove this. If you believe that God can create something that wasn't existing before and bring it into existence, so that's the first law. The first premise is that there is no physically observable reason needed to go from non-existing to existing. There's no physically observable reason. Do you understand? So when God created something that wasn't existing before, there was no physical thing there that would be necessary for that thing to come into existence in the first place. Do you understand? It's not even existing yet. Okay? Even though that temporal notion is there. But the point is that if God does not need any physically observable reason to bring something from non-existent to existence, if this is true, then the reverse is also true. That there is no physically observable reason needed to go from existing to non-existent. So meaning I'm establishing that God can create from no prior material, no prior existing thing. God can create from that. And I'm also establishing that God can annihilate something that is already existing without any physical reason. Like, did you explode? Did something happen? No need for any physical explanation. It will just go out of existence. Just like there was no physical explanation needed for it to come into existence, there's no physically observable reason needed for it to go out of existence. So absolute power belongs to God in that respect. Now, this is the second one. If this is true, that God can create from absolute nothingness and can annihilate into absolute nothingness, then God is the non-physical necessary reason needed for anything to begin to exist. That's the first one. Okay? And for any action to occur, I'm taking it to the next one. For any action to occur, it is not just the physical signs that you look at. You have to look at, did God allow it to occur or not? Because nothing has sufficient reason to come into existence from nothing on its own to begin to exist. Nothing has any sufficient reason to begin to exist. Therefore, nothing can occur. No action can occur without God. That's what we're saying. Without God, it cannot occur. Because all you see are physical signs that were not necessary for it to come into existence in the first place. Therefore, they are not necessary. They are not sufficient. Okay? That's what I'm saying. They are not sufficient for them to occur or continue to exist or things like that. God will still be the one that sustains them and allows any action to occur. Okay? Therefore, your hand moves only because God allows it. That's what we're going to the conclusion to. If you now want to deny this will be to deny God as the sole creator. You have to say God didn't create the creation. You have to say God didn't create us. To deny what I'm saying, you have to say God didn't create us, and it's not, God doesn't have power over all. You have to say that too. God doesn't have power over everything. You have to say this. But it's even sufficient to say God didn't create us. You have to say that. Just like maybe the ex-material or that material, because material will already have its own function. Even though it's formless, it will have some kind of limits that cannot be broken, that even God has to succumb to, because it is equally eternal with God. Do you understand? You have to go to that place. But there's more. It will be to say that creation is uncreated. It will be to say like what these guys are saying, that matter is neither created nor destroyed. Because it wasn't created in the first place, so how can God destroy it? Something that God didn't create is equally eternal. But we are denying this. So we are saying to deny that your hand can move sufficiently by just looking at physical things will be to deny that God will be to say that creation is uncreated and is sufficient for itself. So you have to say creation is uncreated and it is sufficient for itself. That's the only way you can affirm this. And I believe no theists want to accept this. Okay? Even though, funny enough, many theists have accepted the idea of an eternal existing matter with God and things like that. But me, I want to show, like, we don't believe in this. We believe God brought the universe or all the creation after non-existent. Only God is pre-eternal. Only God is beyond all of this. And is a sufficient reason for every other thing that happens. So when I move my hand, now it wouldn't be a contradiction, because normally sufficient reason is supposed to be a contradiction. Like, if there's a sufficient reason for your hand to move from here to here, it will necessarily move. But I said that your hand can, in the first time you check all the conditions, physical conditions, and it moves. And the second time you check all the physical conditions and it doesn't move. This is a contradiction. It's a contradiction. But if there's another external, non-physical reason that we are not observing physically, but we can arrive to logically, then it will be that reason why the first time it moves and the second time it doesn't move. And with this, even all those physical reasons become unnecessary in the real sense, because God doesn't need them either. It can happen, it can move without those physical conditions, because the real necessary sufficient reason is actually God, not the physical things that you're observing. So you will make a mistake by ascribing causation to those physical things while not understanding that they were not necessary, they were not sufficient for anything to happen. In fact, we would say they are not necessary. Only God is actually necessary, okay, and sufficient for any action. So moving my hand from here to here, my heart beating, all of that is in control of God. That's what we are saying. And now, I think maybe an atheist, maybe he's not convinced by this argument, but my point is still the same. I think if you, let's say an atheist and he believes it's nature, it is either God or nature. Do you understand? Is that God? Like all the explanation I've given, is either it is God or it is nature. Because this same thing will apply to nature also. If it's nature, then still you cannot move your hand from here to here. One time you can move, the other time it doesn't move. Because, and if you believe in like this Big Bang stuff, that somehow there was nothing and then something happened. And anything can literally come out of that. So there's no reason, there's no logic that, this is what will come out of nothing. Even in your own paradigm. And if you believe this, all what I've said will be valid also. So let me see what you guys think about this. Do you have any questions on this issue? To show that we give absolute power back to God. We have no power. Only God has power. Wala hawla wala quwwata illa billah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.